We'll just proceed.
Proceed. Okay, so I'll talk about Fort Stanton Cave. I'll try to just move fast because there's a lot of photos as I usually do in these presentations. But I've got some progress on the map this last year. You can see the full map printed out as of the end of September. And that's pretty much what we've got right now, 56.24 miles. So it's the second longest cave in the state. What is it, seventh longest in the country, something like that right now?
Yeah.
And it's continuing to grow. And so this year was a pretty exceptional year, despite all the Ruidoso flooding and the mud flows and all that happened the last, 2 years ago, the fires, and then the flooding last year up on the surface. The cave wasn't really impacted. In fact, it was like a drought in the cave. The cave is much drier, but the new areas that were discovered are quite wet. But they're not really Snowy River. They're side passages. I'll show you. Oh, dang it. Down, right. So I've showed this before, but it just shows the actual footprint of the cave here compared to Mammoth Cave system and Lechgia and Carlsbad. You can see it's a very long linear cave, about 220 degrees this way. The map is oriented so that up is 50 degrees to the northwest of north. So that map would be tilted up like this if it was oriented the way normal cave, maps are with the north up. And these are the new discoveries of last year. This is Snowy River continuing off to the southwest. This is MK Ultra, which is a big breakout last year. This is Noire and Tierra de Leyendas. That's all out here last year. And then that was the biggest year in a while. 7.1 miles was added to the cave last year. And this is what it looks like now. So the red is the new stuff this year. So what you saw there is the basic map you saw a minute ago. And this has all been added. This is a significant breakout that's called the Northwest Passage. And so we added 4.7 in 2025. We would have probably done more, but then there was this thing called the government shutdown in October. And we had 2 more expeditions planned. So if they had done a mile each, we'd have been up there, but it didn't happen. So these were fielded this year. These are the various trips. And this was a little formatting that's supposed to be there. But anyway, so we had trip leaders John Dunham and Jason Belinsky and Adam Weaver and Riley Drake, and I can't remember who else, Garrett, of course. So so these are the feet of each expedition. Now I'll go into a little detail on them. So you can see we started 4.7 miles lower than this. So there's where we are now. And so the first expedition was Riley Drake's trip on May 11th, and it was 4,935 feet. What you see here is Steve's map that he put together from the sketches out of the cave. This is not the final cartography in Adobe Illustrator. These are kind of composite maps put together with the line plot and the sketches. And they're very good because they show this little green here and this little green here. There's the Northwest Passage, that's that part. And there's this other part, Porcupine Passage here. So those were found in May, and then they camped at the MJ camp, which is down in the, about there on the big map, somewhere out in that part where all the passages break out. They completed Porcupine, which was found in 2024. They found a large vertebra in the cave. They had a breakout called Northwest Passage that was continuing when they left at 20 by 15 feet. They took water samples at Finger Lakes and Midnight Creek for Riley's research in microbiology. And they discovered that the Midnight Creek water source is not as big as it used to be, which was concerning because that's a major water source for camping out there, 12 miles or 10 miles from the entrance. This is Morgan from the Northeast Cavers. This is typical rolling your pack in Snowy River. That's the kind of packs you do for a 4-day camp trip. And that's what happens when 4 people explode their packs. And that's out there at MJ Camp. Here's some photos from their expedition. I have to thank all these cavers for sending these into the trip reports because I wasn't on these trips, but none of them could be here today. So I said, I'll get all your photos together. And here we are. So they found some pretty neat passage going off in the Northwest Passage. There's Riley, the trip leader. This is the vertebra they found. I think Riley checked it with some paleontology people, and it's believed to be a pronghorn vertebra. And this is like over 10 miles, 11 miles from the entrance of the cave. Figure that out. So here's the Northwest Passage, the beginning of it here. And that was going out of stuff we had found in 2012, the MA Passage. So this is basically headed out of that area right off Snowy River, not too far from camp. And they ended up having a sizable chunk of cave going there, and nice selenite needles and a nice golden calcite coating on the floor. So they're in two covers here. So we're bringing all kinds of clean stuff to go in these kind of areas in the cave in top of your pack, because this part of the cave is also dirty. So they have to go back and forth clean and dirty. So here's Raymond looking at a nice old pool line, pool basin. More passage ahead. Pretty speleothems there coming up out of the floor, and drippies. They call this Winter Wonderland. It kind of looks nice this time of year, what we're hoping to see up on the ski slopes. And this is like directional aragonite on one side, these stalactites. And here's some aragonite, little bush, like a little dog standing on its paws there. And they left some good borehole on this trip. Next trip was in June, and on this one it was over a mile mapped, and it was working in this area right here. It wasn't, okay, what you just saw was there and there. Now they're working, this team is working in here, and Borderlands is one of the areas, and the other one is This Is Ridiculous, was the name of the passage. Back, and that was found actually quite some time ago, 2013, I believe, or 2014, and hadn't been visited since. And it had lead at the end of it, so they continued it, and it went off here, went off the map. And this one kind of intertwined Borderlands right in here. So they also camped at the MJ camp, and they surveyed leaving leads in This Is Ridiculous, and it is still ridiculous. They surveyed ML 1 through 40 in a new survey and left going leads, but they were not great leads. Otherwise, they would have been a little later coming out of the cave, but they left stuff for next year. And they transported first aid cache kits for the BLM out to Finger Lake and MJ camp that Ron helped pack those big packs. They were huge packs of extra stuff. And they set up, I said dry traps. I think I meant dye traps for Ben Tobin, who's now doing a hydrology project for the cave project. And Ben's the director of NICRI now. So he was on this trip, I believe, yeah. And so he brought a bunch of dye traps. And they're going to be placed, they're already in the cave, so the next time it starts flooding again, we hope to get some data and maybe from surface sources. And the Midnight Creek water source appears to be still adequate, although not great. So these are some needles. There's been some nice fossils. There's a scale an inch. So you can see they're not huge, but they're pretty impressive hanging out the wall there. And this didn't come out too well, but they're in a lot of tall canyon passage here. There's Alex Fisher from Albuquerque down here. They did find, it looks like another ringtail skeleton, Victor. And we have one out in the PA passage. Went out. Looks like we have another one here. This one's disassociated from the rest of its body. You can see some bones over here, broken off, and the head's turned this way. So perhaps that was a water flow at one time and washed it, spread it out like that. And looks like a high lead right there. Lots of stream cobbles, but that's on pretty much every one of this year's expeditions found stream cobbles and running water in this part. This is Beth Courtwright from Los Alamos, some really nice draperies coming out of that crack in the ceiling. And then they also got in some really nasty mud. And so, this is their dirty gear, trying to stay, they have to pack those shoes up and then go back to Snowy River shoes for coming out. There they are sketching. This is a nice reflection pool here, Ben. And they left some really nice looking passage. I don't know if they left that, but that was one of their shots. And I like this picture because they're looking off into blackness. I think it's a stage photo. I'm not sure. I'm sure they went in there and surveyed it, but it's a neat photo. August 14th, this was a trip with Adam Weaver, I believe, and Garrett and Renee and Alex Fisher, and they did over about a mile and a half of passage, and they added to the tip of MK Ultra, and they added in this part here. And they did not use MJ Camp. They used what Garrett calls Camp Wolf. And it's pretty much a bivy. So they bring everything in the cave and their sleeping gear, take it all back out. There's no permanent camp because they're way away they're so far from MJ, at least 3 or 4 hours of difficult travel. So there's no point in camping there each day and going back. So they actually bivvy out where they were. And they mopped up a bunch of new areas of survey, some old leads, and then continued. This was stuff that was found in the discovery in the previous, last year when they were out there, when Garrett found a lot of that. They mopped up MK and added a new survey. They found a sump. They were able to bypass it, but they had to crawl in water with airspace and get really wet. They didn't want to, but they, pushed ahead with the airflow, and they left what they call the corn dog lead. What is that? Well, that's because they were all wet and they would have gotten all powdered and coated in this powdery dry. So they call it the corn dog lead for some future trip. And they left an ear dipper wet passage that would need wetsuits. And the Mammoth Cave of the West is an appropriate name for where they were. Wet stream passage crawling. So these are some photos from their trip. You can see they got pretty slimed up. I know, and it's just weird that it's like Mammoth Cave caving, and here we are in New Mexico and dry Fort Stanton Cave. So this cave is blowing everybody's mind what it's changing to. And some really neat scallops in the wall there and floor when water's flowed. A lot of water on their trip. Trying to straddle the water. I don't think he succeeded. Eventually he got all muddy, but this is early on. Nice long with water on the floor. Sewer passage. Here's real sewer passage here. A lot of stream cobbles, really interesting, colorful stream cobbles in this area. Yeah, so we could run some science trips out here. And Right. We could do some science out here. This was strictly a survey trip, so they didn't have a permit to collect or anything. So here's some more crawling over stream cobbles with water. The next trip was the 21st, and this was Jason Polinsky, who hasn't been back in the cave since 2014. And so he led this trip, and they knocked off a little more on the end of this part right here. Is what they did. And about half a mile roughly of cave. They camped at MJ. They completed, I think this is the wrong slide. Anyway, because this is a slide for the other trip. But basically, they camped and surveyed that, and I'll show the photos resulting from that. So that's a nice looking little borehole there with a survey flag and a bunch of flowstone. And some more tall canyon passage. You can see here. I apologize to Donald, who's online, because I'm flipping the slides pretty fast. And I don't know if he's catching these all, and we'll have to send it to him to watch later. But this is red velvet, what we call red velvet in Fort Stanton Cave. It's velvet calcite crystallization that you see in the cave, but this has a particular red hue to it compared to the darker colors you see in like Lincoln Caverns and places like that. And they've got sort of a Snowy River floor here. Part of their survey was on a little more Snowy River side passage or very close to it. And there's Rhiannon Colton. This was her first trip in the cave from Arkansas. There's Stan Allison, who came back. He hasn't been in the cave since 2014 either. He came on this trip. And then September 20th, Garrett ran a day trip to bring some new people in the cave. And they went to the Metro, which is this passage right here that we found in the early days, 2003. And they just surveyed the subway, which is, it's always been a route through there, but there's little side crawls. So they ended up doing the Taj McCraw. And so this used to be a single route through, and you can see they kind of filled it out. And they added about 456 feet with just that little bit of survey. It was quite decorated. So that was going downstream away from the normal way, Noire south. This is Noire River North. And they passed the old Priority 7 boat ramp and then continued up to Metro. And they mopped up side leads, and it was below what we used to call the Scary Carry Traverse. And there was some gypsum flower stuff there, and in that area, little gypsum flower here. And this needle, I'm not sure if this is in Metro or in their survey, because you also see something like this up in Metro. A needle with a curl at the end. And then the last trip this year was 23rd of September, and there was about 4,400 feet surveyed. And this was the Northeast team returned, the ones that did the May trip that found the Northwest Passage. They came back to continue the Northwest Passage. So these guys are from Massachusetts, Vermont, and they are very diligent. They fly down and spend 2 weeks here. And they love it. I mean, we let them survey in the old part of the cave. They earned their keep, and now they're leading trips. And Riley was doing microbiology. Now she's leading survey expeditions as well as microbiology. So she's very active in the cave with us, and we like it. So here's Northwest Passage. You see they extended it. Look how it turns and it parallels Snowy River, but it didn't connect. Had a little side thing, and it's just paralleling. We're hoping that doesn't reconnect. We're hoping it goes back out here somewhere. Because see that? That is a long way away, several miles by the crow's fly, and more than that. And that's a mega borehole that never was. It's a dig. It seals up in breakdown. But we've always wondered if this super borehole had continuation. Well, maybe there is something over here. Because you notice most of our discoveries in the last decade have been on the southwest or southeast side or south side, and there's not much on the north side except Captain Caverns, and there's Lincoln Caverns here. So there's not much on that side on the northwest, but Northwest Passage is nice because it is out that way. And they worked in this, and they did a little more in here off the MA Passage. This is Noire, which I talked about last year. That was no cave for old men. This is the PA Passage. I've gone to a lot of trips in that area. Notice there's nothing happening down here. That was supposed to happen in October. And that was going to be Adam's trip to go push Snowy River South past station 880. We now have 880 stations from here to here, excuse me, wherever we join in, right here. There's 880 something stations of SRS survey. And this is where we're out getting into the private land now, and the landowners are mixed out in this area of the cave, but basically they're still going there too. There's big lead there, but we couldn't get back to it. And I was going to come back and push this, which is going lead, but again, we weren't there in October because of the shutdown. So here's some photos from their trip. I'll just quickly go through. They had a thing called polar vortex last trip, which was very windy. It ended, but then they found the Polar Express that was also area. It was a parallel, so they went off into that, and they mapped up 7 leads in the old MA Passage, and they took more water samples for Riley. So here's their photos, some of their photos. Yeah. Nice little aragonite again. A lot of air. You'll find this where there's airy passage. And it's usually directional, pointing away or towards the going passage. It's either, the airflow makes it directional. And there's more. And they were in some pretty nice looking passage, although they did say that the Northwest Passage pinched quite a bit on them and got tight, but it's still going. It wasn't as pleasant as the first trip where they were walking and it was all borehole. Now it's getting a little bit more work, but they had some nice looking tube here. definitely looking more Mammoth Cave-like. Some of this. And this is another one of those great shots where it's blackness beyond. I love these kind of shots. Riley's laughing, but there's somebody over there. And that's the end of the presentation. So Fort Stanton Cave is now longer than anything in West Virginia and shorter than the newest cave in Tennessee, which is Helms Deep, is about 77 miles. But basically, if Helms Deep hadn't been found, Fort Stanton would be longer than anything in Tennessee or West Virginia. Just a little brag there. Any questions?
How about airflow of the frontier here?
It's every one of those frontiers has airflow. Like Noire has airflow. Northwest Passage has good airflow. SRS South has airflow. MK Ultra, I'm not sure how much airflow. There is airflow, I believe, but you know, it's not. It's like it's all diffused in that cave nowadays. We're finding it in places only where there's a restriction, you'll still find it. So even, but you know, in Snowy River, back in the days when we were doing the big Snowy River South, we could feel airflow when it was 20 feet wide. I mean, you stand there and get cool on one side. So that cave is amazing, the amount of airflow going through it. Okay, so any other questions? Yeah, Pete?
I might point out that some of the better pictures of it in the calendar and also a small version of this wall map in the calendar with some of these areas.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, the calendar, definitely talked to Pete about the new calendar. And this, by the way, this photo was from that last trip. They found these neat ripples in the mud that water had gone across, and it's really pretty. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a scale there, but I'm guessing it's a few feet across at least. That's all I have.
Good.